Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome now to episode 4 of the Fun Facts About Fasting series, and today we are talking about fasting and inflammation. Now this is actually quite a special episode for me because I'm very situated and personal to the research of inflammation, because that's actually what I research in the lab. Respiratory pharmacology is my kind of trade at the moment. But me as a researcher in general, I'm fascinated with how we can naturally alter our immune system to boost our capabilities of overcoming certain conditions, and even altering our immune system to prevent us getting certain conditions. And believe it or not, fasting is a really good way to help us do just that. We know actually the importance of nutrition and exercise for all sorts of kind of preventative measures, looking after ourselves, having good overall health. But sometimes fasting gets not as much of a mention in this kind of remit of being anti-inflammatory, because as we know, a lot of conditions that we face, whether infectious or not, for example cancer, cardiovascular, some of the conditions I've already mentioned on this channel, inflammation is actually one of the biggest precursors of that. Chronic inflammation or hyperinflammation that is quite abnormal is something we don't want to have, and we look at many anti-inflammatory approaches to try and actually limit that. Believe it or not, fasting is actually a good anti-inflammatory approach, which is what I'm going to mention in this episode. So there's actually a large body of research that looks into how does fasting or fasting mimicking diets help to induce some sort of anti-inflammatory response from our body to try and curb certain inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, like cancer, like other rheumatological diseases. It's quite a mouthful to say. Rheumatological? I think it's rheumatological. But anyway, you know what I mean. So these kind of conditions are sometimes beneficial when a person is actually doing some form of fasting. But the question is, how does it actually work? I'm about to tell you. So funny enough, when I was doing some research behind the scenes for this episode, I came across a very, very interesting paper, and I'm just going to have a look at it, by Jordan and colleagues in 2019 in the publication Cell, so quite a big publication. And believe it or not, what they actually found was that monocytes, which is a very key important white blood cell, in terms of their circulation in the blood, was actually reduced when people were embarking on some sort of fasting, which then lowered the overall inflammation. So it's actually a direct effect of fasting and direct effect on lowering the amount of inflammatory white blood cells in this context. And having that level reduced over time, it's phenomenal to think that just changing the way you eat causes that approach in your body. And moving on a bit forward, I looked into some kind of clinical based studies, and I found a paper from Clinical Rheumatology in 2017 where they looked at the effect of fasting on patients who actually have rheumatoid arthritis. And what they found is when everybody has these kind of chronic type of conditions, they do these questionnaires to assess the person's disease severity. So how do they feel the disease is affecting themselves over time? And they found that these scores, which you see over here, were actually reduced in terms of the marker of inflammation, known as ESR, and a more of a specific marker for inflammation, known as CRP. So erythrocyte sedimentation rate is ESR, which is essentially a non-specific marker of inflammation, and CRP is C-reactive protein, which is actually quite a specific marker for inflammation. And they found that these kind of markers were reduced or lowered as a result of some form of fasting in their cohort of patients. So you can see these two very interesting viewpoints on how does fasting cause an anti-inflammatory episode for you. And again, what I find really remarkable is just changing the way you eat, as I mentioned throughout this series. But that's actually causing a direct effect on your white blood cell kind of population, your white blood cell behavior, just by changing the way you eat. Quite interesting, isn't it? And lastly, just to comment on another angle where I mentioned in previous episodes how fasting helps to boost our antioxidant capabilities, and as a result reduces that oxidative stress, which is very much linked to inflammation. So even though it's not direct as what this episode is, it's still a very interesting point to raise in terms of kind of fasting and anti-inflammatory type events. But in any case, hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss the next 26 episodes throughout this month. So I'll be doing it roughly at 6 o'clock. But again, do subscribe if you can and hit that notification bell for me, please. So, see you tomorrow, episode 5. Take care.